So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the fourth Community of Practice meeting for the CyBR-MSI Infrastructure Research Readiness Program. As always, my name is Dr. Jackie El-Sayed, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer at ASEE. The topic of today's meeting is IRR Institutional Change Management. Your assignment to prepare for today's meeting was to interview multiple administrators and individuals in upper management to get their unique insights on institutional capacity building and change management. You were also to invite each interviewee to the CAP meeting scheduled for June 21 to hear your action plan. Now, we intentionally ask you to invite them because we realize that they're busy and we hope that they will be able to attend the action planning meeting with the MSI campus leadership session. We have extended the session by 10 minutes. It will still start at 1:25 p.m., but will now end at 3:05 instead of 2:55 p.m. Eastern Time. Please send us an email and let us know which of your administrators had indicated availability, and we, ASEE, will send them the calendar invite. Thank you to the teams that have already sent in their administrators' names and contact information. So everyone, please feel free, even if you didn't have a clear yes, I will attend, please send it to us and we will send them the calendar invitation to get it on their calendar. Now, today we're going to begin a panel session during which your mentors will provide general feedback on team progress. We will then have the instructor-led session on IRR Institutional Change Management, and then this will be followed by a guided inquiry session, after which we will move into team breakouts and the breakouts with mentors. Now, I want to just remind everybody that the team breakouts are specifically for your teams, and your mentor is not included in that first part. That's your time to think about your assignment as well as what you've learned in the informational session and prepare to meet with your mentors before you do that in the second half of that. So it's intentional that your teams are alone first and then you meet with your mentors. So going on to the logistical reminders. As a reminder, please mute yourself when you're not speaking. You can ask questions at any time using the chat pod. Now, these meetings are recorded except for the breakout sessions, and that's intentional on our part. Again, we do not include recording of the breakout sessions so that you can talk about sensitive issues without having any recording present. And I want to also mention that ASEE board has now stated that in order for anyone other than ASEE, in order to use an AI recorder, you must have permission by ASEE and those that would be recorded. So just a note for that. Now, closed captioning is available provided by Zoom. Next. Now, please change your name in Zoom to the numeral of your team, space, your first name, space, your last name. I think there's a next, are we on the next slide? Thank you. Your team is shown on the screen, and there's an example of how your name should be reflected in the last row of this table. Now, I'm going to give you a minute to change your Zoom names before we start the mentor panel. And I believe that ASEE staff too, you'll see that ASEE staff have ASEE before their names, and usually our mentors have mentor before their names, and that just makes it easier for us when we put you into breakout rooms. So please take a moment and make sure that you have made those changes. And mentors, you know, I'm going to come up to you next. So as we know, these are our wonderful mentors who are providing so much of their experience to helping our teams be successful. And some of them have been with us for some time in other capacity building work, and all of them have CyBR background and are familiar with NSF proposals, so they can really work with you on the specifics of your with your sponsored research. So with that, I'm going to go into the SII. We use the strengths, improvements, and insights to be able to have our mentors provide that feedback. So let me start with, let's see who's on my screen here. I would how about Sharad? Let's start with you. I don't think I usually start with you.
Okay, yeah, sure. So this time, I think some of the teams really did a superb job. Especially, I would like to pinpoint team 7 and 8 that I was involved in. They really looked into interviewing the whole administration altogether. So they interviewed provost, dean, associate dean, department chair, senior faculty, and faculty, and got responses for barriers and enablers and they were very succinct, very detailed out, which would really help in the next thing to come up with the strategies. And I mean, there were some of the commonalities which were observed, but the way it was structured and summarized was really good. They spent a lot of time doing this work, so that was really nice.
Great.
I mean, if we can go into different questions if you would like to, but I mean,
let's go around with all the mentors first, and
okay.
Then we can circle back. How about that?
Yep.
All right. Enrico, would you like to share the strengths that you found with the general strengths that you found across the teams?
In general, first of all, I would say that, I mean, I would like to follow Sharad's approach of actually kind of giving a shout, and I would really like to say that there is one team that really did a fantastic job in providing the responses. And I really like the fact that not only they interviewed different people, but they also kind of broke down the responses by the person that was interviewed, which to me is very important because different people in different positions have very different perspectives. So definitely I would really like to give a shout to Team 13 for doing a fantastic job in their answer. There is a lot of consistency among the responses that we've seen from different institutions, so which is good because it means that we're all facing similar challenges. It's not that every university, I mean, every university is different, but the challenges tend to be kind of very, very similar to each other. Good summaries of the challenges, very insightful. You know, typical recurring themes, as Sharad mentioned, they're kind of like very, very similar to each other. So good job overall, but Team 13, you're my prize. Great job.
I like it. Patricia?
Sure, thank you. So some of the strengths that were identified, again, a very commendable job by Team 9 from John Jay College of the CUNY system. One of the strengths was that they do have some in-house internal support from some prior grants, which was gratefully acknowledged. Also, release time is a standard at their institution for new faculty. So I want to learn more about that today, as I'm sure my other teams might. They do have some real champions for raising funds and getting grants in-house. And so this particular team, Team 9, went and surveyed their chair, surveyed this powerhouse of a faculty member, and they also have another high-level administrator, I believe the provost, scheduled. It was not able to be scheduled in the time frame that they needed for this assignment, but it's still on deck and they're going to go through with it. So that's where we stand with that, with our groups.
Perfect. And I'm hearing what was very intentional, that the teams, we specifically asked them to talk to different administrators so they could start to see how different administrators themselves have different lenses. And so I really appreciate that they're still going to go and interview their provost, because that's going to be a different lens than who they've interviewed before. So that's really important. Thank you. Okay, Kenneth, how about you? Strengths. Kenneth here. Let's move on. I'll come back to Kenneth. Seth?
I'll do the shout out since we're doing shout outs. Team 8 for me. I think they wrote a small dissertation about how the university works, and it's really impressive, both in the scope and the level of detail, the way they've taxonomized the positions and who's responsible for what, something others have already mentioned, was insightful. And it made me realize that I myself don't understand at my university what's the role of the associate dean versus the dean versus the provost when it comes time to do things like startup packages or release times. But Team 8 knows. And
That's
that was,
good.
I thought, quite a strength. And the university itself has some strengths, some surprising strengths. For example, the provost views encouraging the research mission as a tool for retention of faculty. And I thought that was a brilliant insight, and it surprised me that a provost had it. And I just think it speaks well for the institution that folks in very high level leadership positions are looking not just as sort of bureaucratic paper pushers, but really the health of the institution from the perspective of faculty members that might be, being recruited from other places.
Fantastic. That is such a positive insight, right? And I love it. So great. Even our mentors are going to go back and ask some questions and learn things at how their particular institution does things, right? So that's great. So let me now go to areas for improvement. So now we're back at Sharad.
Yeah, so I mean, there was a consistent story by most of the teams which we looked into, and a couple of enablers were talking about cutting edge research facilities that were available and resources, and they also talked about the demographics of the faculty, which was a positive, and the collegial environment that was there, which was supportive to research, which was very pleasurable to notice. And there was also talk about support from for pre-award grant officers. And there was some support from deans and department chairs office that was nice to see as well. Support from the sense of critiquing on the language of formal and informal writing. So that was nice to see that those options are available. So that was for the building capacity point of view, from the enablers point. The barriers that was consistent for building capacity was there was a talk about the teaching load, which was kind of consistent, 3+3 and 4+4 and 2+2, those things. There was a talk about lack of resources and the overcommitment of faculty and a lot of other things. There was also talk about the bureaucracy and the infrastructure support, which is lacking. So those were the few just that I noticed from my side.
Thank you. Yeah. And actually, I'm still learning about the bureaucracy, even at ASWE, because now I have to do sponsor research myself, right? And looking at all the audits, like we always heard about the audits, but when you actually have to go and look at what they do in an audit, you understand why they're trying to dot all those I's and cross all those T's, because it just takes so much time. So we're all learning. Thank you, Rod. Enrico, areas for improvement.
So, I mean, it's a lot of the things that Sharad said are the same similar things that I've seen in the reports from the various teams. The areas of strengths are basically very similar in the sense a lot of institutions have a lot of new faculty members with a lot of enthusiasm and new ideas and kind of that hunger to get things done and to write proposals, which is great. And there is also several institutions mention a growth in the research infrastructure in terms of hiring staff positions to help with the development of proposal. But at the same time, barriers that are typically recurring is the risk of burnout of faculty, heavy teaching load that doesn't give the time to actually build proposal, the fact that institutions are hiring a lot of new PhDs, which come in with enthusiasm, but with no experience. So they're inexperienced in navigating the domain of writing proposal. Bureaucracy has been mentioned repeatedly by several of the reports as an obstacle, as well as I found it very interesting. One of the report talks also about too much turnover in senior administration, which does not kind of provide stability and vision. And then, of course, the recurring challenge is about lack of resources. For example, to give kind of buyout to faculty, to release them from teaching so that they can focus on developing proposals, or just even in physical infrastructure for research that is needed in order to kind of create competitive cases.
Yeah, so lack of that infrastructure, but also sometimes lack of knowledge. Did you find that as well? Lack of knowledge of the pocketed infrastructure that exists too. Yeah. Thank you. Patricia, you're next.
Sure. Good feedback from the teams. Certainly, it was noticed that the size of the student body, and then it's been growing, obviously, in many of our areas. John Jay mentioned that the percent of faculty engaged in research is perhaps not as high, which I think gets to a departmental culture that might affect things, or an institutional culture. They also mentioned, several of my teams, that it takes time to, as we get more familiar writing proposals, these things come easier, but to Enrico's point about the newer faculty, it takes time to get the biographical sketch or the conflicts and all of these things going. And then we had a couple of really good office hour events where we collaboratively talked about some of the changes that NSF is implementing and what that would mean to the timeline to get out some of the more recent proposal calls, and how teams in the midst of writing proposals would have to adapt and change to the new requirements. So time needed to draft proposals and collect docs was something very finite that came up in challenges and barriers, as well as weaknesses.
Totally understand that, right? And as you get more multidisciplinary, collecting all those docs is like something you have to start immediately. Takes a long time. So I think I'm going to go to Seth now. I don't think I see Kenneth here. Go ahead, Seth.
Sure. I mean, it's resources, and the resources range from time of the individual faculty member, heavy teaching loads, not enough PhD students, not enough people in RSP. And it's interesting to see that everybody thinks it's resources, but the provost thinks it's one set of resources, and the dean thinks it's a different set of resources, and the school chair thinks it's a different set of resources. Everybody knows they're missing stuff, but it doesn't seem like anybody sees the full picture of how much stuff is missing.
Totally agree. So maybe our teams can help that as we have these action plans. And they can invite all of their administrators. You know, they can hear from each other, from the teams who are now going to be the experts on this type of research, on this analysis, right? But also because they'll hear from other MSIs and how other MSIs have similar issues, so that it's not targeted to them at all. It's something that that everybody's in this together in some ways. Yeah. So mentors, do you have any other advice or any other points that you'd like to share? I'll just open it up for any of the mentors. If you have any other advice or comments that you would like to share with the teams.
One of the things that came out very strongly, I mentioned they did speak to what I'm characterizing as a superstar at their institution. And this was also echoed by the chair. Collaborators are very, very important. And I think that's really significant. Collaborators perhaps outside the institution as well as inside the institution. And then also mentors, which are different from collaborators, or can be, and then partnerships were stressed. And I don't think we've mentioned that strongly as we should at this point. So.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Patricia.
Another thing
That's-
I would really like to point out, there was some very interesting comments about the need to train people to use data properly so that that could facilitate the development of proposal and the removal of silos, which means really inspiring a cultural collaboration. And then, of course, leadership in the institution in terms of establishing development of research programs and research initiatives as a priority at the institutional level, so that trickles down into everything that the institution does, like annual evaluation, promotion and tenure, all these different aspects.
Thank you, Enrico. That's excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, there was also about talk about the investment in personnel. So there was talk about to foster research activities, there needs to be investment in hiring new faculty as well as providing support for existing faculty for research. And there was also something shared towards the end by the teams, by the people about education and workshop point of view, that the institutions could benefit from hosting workshops that could educate both staff, OSRP staff, as well as faculty for more effectively writing proposals for grants. So that was something to point towards.
Thank you. Anybody else? So thank you so much, mentors. That was great feedback. Thanks to all of the teams who are really making strides and doing all this analysis. As mentioned, you are going to be the experts in this analysis. And we hope that that will lead into that your action plan and the discussions around your action plan will lead into you being, facilitating these discussions to be very productive and increasing your institutional research readiness. So now we're going to move on, and we now have our instructor-led session on IRR Institutional Change Management, led by Dr. Susanna Porterfield. Sue is Vice President for Research at Keene University. She joined Keene in May 2023 to primarily focus on two things. First, setting up the infrastructure needed to help facilitate the move to an R2 status under the Carnegie classifications of research institutions. This involves making Keene faculty's pursuit of their research mission easier, reducing the administrative burden, and removing structural barriers. Second, is growing and diversifying the university's research portfolio. Her desire is to help faculty rediscover research by doing it in a collaborative way. In addition, her team is focused on preparing faculty to apply for a broader set of external research opportunities, like CyBR. Before joining Keene University, Sue worked for 20 years at Johns Hopkins University, where she was the Senior Associate Vice Provost for Research. And while at Hopkins, Sue enhanced research collaboration efforts across 9 schools and managed the Bloomberg Distinguished Professor's $250 million gift, which provides funds to hire 50 highly esteemed faculty. In addition, she oversaw research-related units and devoted effort to a variety of cross-cutting research initiatives tied to the university's strategic plan. Leading operational efforts from the provost team gave her broad experience in navigating the challenges and opportunities associated with leading an institute of higher education. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Sue.
Great, thank you. Let me see if I can share my screen. Here we go. Perfect. Okay, let's see what's going on. Because everybody can see, we're good. Why is that?
We can see it,
weirdness?
but we can also see your next slide and your notes if that's where you want it to be.
No, let's try that one more time. Okay, end slideshow. Let's try that with the normal slideshow. Is it better now?
Are
Or
you
you
still
can
sharing? Are you
you-
sharing?
You're still seeing my notes?
No, I actually don't see anything right now. You need to reshare.
Okay, let's try
Sharing
that
your
again.
screen again. Yep, it's coming. And yep, hit slide now. Hit your slideshow because
Yeah, I did. Okay, but can you still see the other notes?
yes.
Okay, let's do it this way. How about
Oh,
that?
you got it. You got it. That's it.
Well, we'll modify. How about that? Okay, so I apologize. I am fighting a head cold, so if I sound strange, I really feel better than I sound. So, thank you for having me this afternoon. And if you have questions along the way, feel free to jump in, but I will also leave time at the end for questions. So I think you got a pretty comprehensive introduction of me. And I will say that coming from kind of the top R1 now to Kane, who is on this mission to become R2, was a lot harder of a transition than I had initially anticipated. And I think that's for a variety of reasons, but I can tell you that just the little snippets I heard as I joined are all going to be reflected in what I'm talking about. And it's been a huge educational journey for me, but it's been exciting as well. So when I looked back at what this group and this program was about, a couple words jumped out to me. So I read about you trying to assess your campus's research infrastructure, prioritize the improvements, and then co-create with leadership an action plan. And that's, pretty much what I've been trying to do over the past year that I've been at Kane. All right, let's go on. So I thought I'd start with Cotter's 8 steps for change management, because what I'm trying to do today is weave in how research infrastructure can be approached through a change management model. So Cotter, his first, and this is a model that I used in my graduate study. So his first 3 steps are really about creating the climate. And I just want to talk through those briefly. So number 1, you see establishing this urgency. And here at Kane, that was the organization aspiring to become R2. So our president arrived in 2021 in the summer, and he started that year by announcing he wanted Kane to become R2 by 2025. It was a pretty specific goal that I don't think a lot of people understood at that point in time. So moving to step 2 of forming this guiding coalition, we needed a team to move us in the right direction. And he created an R2 committee that was pretty broad. We started taking the herd survey more seriously, really looking at what could we count as research expenditures, and also encouraging more of those PhD and PsyD and other doctoral degrees. And we started a relationship with the Carnegie classification staff. Moving on to step 3, creating this vision and strategy. How does your future clearly look different than what it is currently? And I would say that R2 was mentioned in almost every conversation that occurred across campus, from senior leadership down to the students. And as a side note, I think while excitement was contagious, I'm not confident that leadership knew how best to become R2, other than strictly this idea of metrics and kind of meeting the minimum threshold. I don't think at this point anyone was thinking about a culture shift. And I can say that because even though I was not employed at Kane at this time, my husband was an associate dean in the business school. So I got to kind of peek behind the curtain, if you will, at Kane and their research infrastructure before I was ever hired. Okay, so moving on, now we're going into that stages 4 through 6 where you're actually making change happen. And so 4, you're communicating this vision and strategy to all the stakeholders by kind of putting your money where your mouth is, or what are you doing to show that you're committed to this change? And at Kane, the president contributed $3 million to buy research equipment. He's hired 40 new faculty, research active faculty, over the past 3 years. So each year over the past 3 years, so like 120 new faculty. He's doubled the faculty release time. And then I came on the scene. He hired a very seasoned vice president for research. So here I am in the middle. Number 5, empowering others to action. And this is where what I'm hearing, what I heard this morning just briefly, is starting to remove the barriers and unleash this potential that's there with the faculty and creating efficiencies. So I started conversations. Whenever I go into a new place, I do a lot of listening. I go on a listening tour and I start to ask faculty and staff, what are the barriers? What's keeping you from becoming more research active? Moving to number 6, you want to create these wins. You want to start to motivate people. Okay, you got to think we're now 2021 started this process. We are now in 2023. You know, people are getting a little tired of hearing this. They want to know what are some wins we've achieved. So I started to earn some trust. I quickly developed some faculty policies that were beneficial to them. So I created these discretionary accounts. I started to return part of the IDC to the faculty. I came up with this idea of faculty banking for the faculty who were either 12-month employees or already had research that were covering their summer months. And then I started to form relationships with the support services. So HR, purchasing, those kinds of things. And then finally, step 7 and 8 are where you sustain the change. And so I would say we are currently in step 7 at Kane, where we want to stabilize. We don't want to give up. We haven't reached R2 yet. That won't be announced until spring of 2025. But I'm continuing to advocate for the faculty. We hired an associate provost for faculty development back in the fall. And so the two of us are starting to partner on a variety of initiatives. Earlier this week, we had a celebration for faculty research, scholarship, and creative works, where we kind of embedded time for faculty to mingle and challenge them to meet at least 2 new people that they hadn't known. And then, like I said, number 8, when you anchor the change, is hopefully going to be next spring when the Carnegie classification comes out. And we'll share those stories so that faculty who have been hired within the past, year or 2 are going to see where we came from and the commitment on behalf of leadership. And our president loves a good celebration. So I have no doubt it's going to be an epic kind of event. So moving into the specifics a little bit, I want to give you some examples from when I arrived until kind of current state. So I identified these 6 areas of concern, and I shared these with the president and the provost about 6 weeks after I arrived. So HR and staffing, we were back to the pre-pandemic staffing levels in ORSP, our research administration group. So there had been no growth. There was no training or mentoring in place, but there were these pockets of excellence. There were these few staff that were really committed and had done some of their own kind of training and education. I divided the team into pre-award and post-award, and pre-award had a very reactive mindset. So if a faculty came to them, they would figure it out and they'd move forward with the proposal. But we need to focus more on the proactive opportunities as well as collaboration. And we just finished implementing Cayuse in our pre-award. We did not have any type of system for keeping proposals. We had like Google spreadsheets. So we're now going to have an official record of proposals. And then post-award, I absorbed the grants accounting area in January, and then the only staff there retired. So that's an area that's ripe for improvement, and one that I am very much focused on at the current state. Support services, we had concerns about purchasing and travel and the time involved, and they weren't user-friendly. Compliance, we had very few policies in place and no clear areas of responsibility. Our health safety person sits over in facilities and didn't have any kind of interaction with the research team and or the deans of especially the more science-focused departments and divisions. And then faculty were very frustrated. They felt very burdened by the administrative processes. And we have a 4-4 teaching loan at Kane, and it's just not sustainable if you want a community of researchers. So the good thing is my background is very broad. I've done everything from departmental support to divisional to central. So I am well positioned to kind of step in and speak to all these different areas. So I set my priorities, and then let's just go into these specifically. So in HR, I had 5 people when I arrived doing everything pre and post award. That's an insufficient staff level for this type of university. The staff lacked grant knowledge and skills to support this portfolio. They had never been to training. They didn't have mentors. The interim director of the office had no experience in research. And I want to encourage you that while there are costs to travel, like to go to an Incura conference or a Nordum conference, there are so many webinars available. So don't let cost be a limiting factor with training your staff. Figure out a creative way to get them what they need, even if you can't afford to send them to one of the larger conferences. And then I mentioned we had no compliance staff and we had lost our grants accounting staff. So our staffing levels are not comparable to our 2 universities, especially in our region. So I am currently, writing up a proposal for our HR group and the provost on what an appropriate staffing model would look like. And I'm hoping to get that to them, within the next couple of months, so that for the next fiscal year, we can start to hire some of these key positions. It's really tough because I'm sure you all know this field has gone pretty much remote. There are very few institutions that are requiring research administration staff to actually be on site. And so we're competing with, a whole bunch of other institutions. And I have, Kane right now is only remote 1 day a week. So that's also, makes it a little tougher to get good quality people into my team. And then at the college level, we really have no support right now. Most of the colleges and departments have some administrative staff, but they're not grant related staff. They're not trained to help with, the bio sketches or help with some of the administrative tasks that are required for proposal submission. So I'm starting to write them in, and I'm starting to contemplate posting some grant staff out in the colleges. But like, who's going to manage them? It's not going to be the staff that are currently there. It's going to fall back on my team. And then we've got, where do they sit? There's, like, I'm sure many of your institutions, space is at a premium. So we got to figure out those kinds of things. And we do have 2 specific centers that I would say are very research active, and maybe where I, try these staff out. They do a lot of activity with sponsored research, and I think they could really benefit from having some specific hires, out there. Moving on to pre-award. So we're doing some proactive efforts. We've added funding opportunities to our website. We've started emailing program solicitations to appropriate faculty and starting to kind of matchmake and find those areas of synergy. We're working with another NSF program called Granted that's through NORDA. So they're offering us some resources, both financially and kind of from the mentoring external perspective on helping me prioritize what I need to work on. NIH has also just recently started for HSIs a similar program, which they're calling ERA. Faculty engagement, as I talked about, we're doing these internal celebrations to motivate other faculty to consider doing or looking for external support. The speed dating events are a great idea. You just, introduce a topic, and then the faculty get to talk for 2 minutes on, how their research activity could work with that topic. So say we're an urban research institute, so maybe I throw out the topic of community health, and then they all can talk. I've also given out Panera gift cards as incentives to encourage faculty to have a further conversation over lunch. We have a couple consultants. We contract with McAllister and Quinn here at Kane. Last year, they were helping us write and submit proposals. This year, they're focused more on building capacity. But they offer training to staff and faculty. That's just another kind of area to increase my bandwidth because I can't do it all. And let's see what else. We need to kind of get back to, we had a really good process in place pre-pandemic, I'm told, where faculty gave us about 30 days notice when they were going to apply for something. Those deadlines have kind of gotten pretty lax. So I'd like to bring back a little bit more structure on the pre-award side. But I will tell you that my mindset is we are customer service focused. We need to do all the administrative pieces of a submission other than the technical. We need to allow the faculty to focus on the technical pieces. They should not be doing bio sketches. They should not be doing current and pending. They should not be writing data management plans. They should not be doing postdoc mentoring plans. All of those, I need my team to be able to support them with because they just don't have time. So then on the post-award side, when I arrived, there were a large number of awards that weren't being managed properly. So both on the spend and on the reporting side. Average spend was about 35% when I arrived, which I found very upsetting because I didn't want future years of funding to be decreased because we weren't spending. I found we were giving back a lot of state money because we weren't spending. So on the pre-award side, I'm now asking the question, this is a 1-year grant. Are you really going to spend $500,000 in 1 year and tell me how you're going to do it? Because it doesn't look good to the state or to whoever that they give you money and you can't figure out how to spend it. So where before everything went in regardless, I'm now pausing and saying either maybe we need to wait or maybe you need to figure out a better plan before we go after this funding. So we also have a foundation that is a separate entity, and they are submitting private submissions to private agencies, not to the state and federal government. That is problematic because number one, they're not in the business of proposal submission. And number two, and the money comes in, we don't have a good way to get the money into the university where the faculty are actually working, or a way that I feel is not going to be a red flag to auditors. So the plan is to move all grant, both pre and post, over to my ORSP team July 1. And, while the foundation's not super happy about that, we're going to allow them to still count, which is really at the end of the day what they want, is to be able to count any money that comes in from a private source in their numbers for the year. I don't care if we double count. We're talking about two separate reporting systems, but I'm more concerned about managing the grants correctly, getting them out the door with the correct information. And so this is kind of, I think, going to have to be our compromise. We've started quarterly meetings with PIs. We never had those before. So my post-award team will sit down, go through the grants with them, any active projects, talk about the spend rate, excuse me, talk about any personnel that need to be hired. Are they being paid from the correct place, or are they not? Let's see, what else? We started a new purchasing system. Well, I'm on the wrong screen. Let me go back a second here to my post-award system. I know it. Oh, that was the other point I was going to make. So our HR system, which is Workday, does not talk to our financial system, which is Illusion. So as you can imagine, the encumbrances never show in the grant reports. So if I'm talking to a PI and I'm trying to tell them what their spend rate is or what their burn rate potentially is, I have to create a shadow spreadsheet to incorporate any salaries of staff, students, or the faculty, which is very difficult. We also don't, in our financial system, have a way to automatically charge fringe or IDC. So again, the poor faculty member who gets their report is looking at it thinking, I have this amount of money left. Well, not really, because none of your salaries are encumbered. Your IDC hasn't been charged on whatever your expenses are, and your fringe rate hasn't been charged on the salaries. So it's almost comedic, if you will, because those reports are absolutely useless. And so my post-award team is really struggling to have to, recreate some sort of a spreadsheet so they can show the faculty to know how they're spending, what they can do. I'm not sure that's something I'm going to be able to fix, but it's just not. It's not good for faculty. So I'm still looking into that one because that's a big problem. And then grants accounting, as I mentioned, the general accounting staff really had no idea that managing grants was so different than managing university funds. And so there's been a large education on my part to have to explain to them about all things grants. I have a position posted right now because we don't have anyone currently. And then research reinvestment accounts were one of the biggest wins that I was able to create last year. So now we've got an IDC distribution model where the college departments and faculty are starting to get part of this back. So it's another incentive for them to go after more external funding. All right, let's see. Keep moving here. Support services and infrastructure. So there was very little appreciation out in the support services that they had to change to be able to support higher research levels. So for instance, a purchasing policy, there was a blanket PO cap. So say we wanted to order lab supplies from VWR. Well, the entire blanket purchase order was only $10,000. So I have various faculty around the university that need to order chemicals, supplies, whatever. Once we get to $10,000, our purchasing department says, sorry, you can't buy anything else from VWR for the entire year. I said, what are you talking about? This is not possible. So things like that, 2 weeks for lab supplies, not at all acceptable. We don't have P cards. So we did implement a new purchasing system this month called ESM. And I will admit that it is a little bit quicker. We have raised the threshold for approvals. So PIs can approve things themselves, or they can come to me or department chair. Things that would have had to go to the CFO in the past. But we still need more flexibility. And while I'll say it was a huge step, there's still more work to be done. Travel is another problem at our university. Right now, it takes about 6 weeks to get travel paperwork approved. And we don't allow for any unchaperoned student travel. So I have a grad student, I want to send him maybe just down the road to Princeton for a week to learn a new technique, something in the lab, to use a piece of equipment. I can't send them without a chaperone, a faculty chaperone. I can't send them to a conference to present a poster unless there's a faculty chaperone. So now a faculty who doesn't have a huge travel budget to begin with has to use it to allow their student the opportunity to go present at this conference. Again, much of this was just not in, like I was, you can see my head explode many a day, but so we're working on that now, coming up with a policy that a grad student could potentially go to a travel by themselves. They also can't access a lab by themselves. They're supposed to be supervised at all times. Well, how is a faculty member supposed to get anything done if they've always got to be monitoring it, weekends, evenings, all those kinds of things. And then teaching load, which I talked about before. Right now, faculty can receive up to a 2-2 in release if they apply for certain release, if they write it into grants, those kinds of things. So how is this going to affect? Well, obviously, a lot of faculty are one and done. It's like, I did this once. It was very frustrating. I can't manage the grant. I feel like I'm letting everybody down. I'm not going to do it again. I don't want that mindset to permeate, obviously. Retention issues, if faculty don't have the support to move forward with this type of thing, they're going to leave. They're going to go somewhere where either they have a lower teaching load or there's more staff to provide better support. All right, moving on. Let's see. Oh, and then the other thing is the rollout of these new systems. If you're ever doing this, you need to involve the stakeholders. Like here, I find it is not transparent, and quite often we'll find out about something at the last minute and it doesn't allow for input. Case in point, the travel system is supposed to roll out July 1. I haven't seen it yet. And it's the end of April. Same with the purchasing system. I didn't see it until, I don't know, a couple weeks before they were going to roll it out to the first group. Well, turns out nobody had thought about an approval workflow for grants, for accounts that were grants. And it doesn't work the same way as a university account because someone from the grants world has to be able to sign off on those purchases. So it ended up being like a 2-week delay because I had to, kind of start from scratch with them and decide the threshold, decide who that would be. And so if you bring people in along the way, you're going to end up with a much better product at the end. Compliance. So effort reporting, that's one thing I'm working on right now. It's a risk to our federal funding because we don't have an official effort reporting system. Our IRB system, we are also moving to Cayuse. It was, again, just a very large, complicated spreadsheet. Took a long time to review IRB and to get answers out to the faculty. We have a lot of old teaching equipment and potentially unsafe lab spaces. Now, does that fall under my purview? Many would argue no, but if I'm ultimately supporting the faculty who are supporting the students, then I have to have a voice in this. And right now it's through my compliance director, who just started in January. And while we have invested in some new equipment, as I mentioned before, there's no maintenance contracts, and there are no dedicated lab managers to kind of manage, monitor the equipment. So there's still work to be done. These are some of the policies that I've created or are in draft since I got here. A lot you will see, they're research related. We're starting to partner with our data security officer. We have a campus, a fully functioning campus in Wenzhou, China. There's issues with data moving back and forth. There's issues with export controls. We don't have any kind of policies on that yet. So that's super important that we get those moving. Same with biosafety. Nate, my compliance director, just started a biosafety committee. Of course, technicians aren't consulted. So our health safety person sits over in facilities. I think I said that, but they can't speak or have any kind of sway over academic departments or deans. So Nate, the compliance, is going to bridge that as well. And then tech transfer and commercialization. We have just started an office to look at that, because we do have some students that are interested, potentially, or faculty in starting companies. And then faculty, and I think this should be my last one. So our senior faculty mentorship for research is missing in most departments, because many of them are not research active themselves. And there is even a little bit of, I would say, resentment on the part of some, that they believe that a faculty who is research active, it's going to hinder their progression toward tenure. So again, some education that's needed. And then we do have 12-month faculty, not a lot of them, but we do have 12-month faculty who were on grants and receiving no benefit from it. So they're now getting the equivalent of salary banking in an account that they can use to further their research. And then on our junior faculty, there's a lack, and I would say junior faculty, meaning who've come in the last 3 years, who are really want to be research active. There's a lack of PhD students. We don't have a huge amount of PhD programs, and we don't have a mechanism right now to even hire postdocs to help with research projects. They have to apply for RTR every year. It's a very, very cumbersome process, but they need to reduce their teaching loads. There is not a huge sense of community across colleges, something I'm working to fix. And then there's a lot of confusion over this tenure and promotion process and how much research is going to help them. And then all faculty, these heavy teaching loads really limit faculty engagement and research. So, my vision, my huge goal is when we announce R2 next year, I would love to be able to announce a 3-3 load for all research active faculty and stop this kind of annual application process, but just be able to give it to faculty who are research active. And then leadership needs to look at what investment might be needed to maintain this financial stability, because if we do move faculty down to a 3-3 load, which is a more typical R2 configuration, we're going to have to backfill with adjuncts or overload or something like that. I think there also needs to be an expectation about the time it takes from an initiation of a project to publishing the results. Right now, that's not a realistic expectation. Even the time it takes to win an external award is not always realistic. A lot of these programs, you may have to do a resubmission. And so that's time, that takes. And then again, what I was mentioning before, decisions that have impacts on the research and infrastructure really need to be made with the researcher in mind, not just by leadership. So just some final thoughts. These are some questions you might want to ask as you are starting through a culture change or a research kind of implementation. So thinking about, what's your culture for research and scholarship? Are you a teaching university? And if so, how do you show leadership that you're implementing research that is going to benefit the students or benefit the teaching side of the house? And think about what are your areas of strength. For the past couple of years, I like to use the analogy of throwing spaghetti at the wall. I think faculty here were just trying anything and everything to see what would stick without really thinking about where are our pockets of strength. Those are the things we should be going after. Those are the program officers we should be talking to. Figure out who your aspirational peer institutions are. See what they're doing. Look at I look at websites all the time, from the research administration side of the house. Think about what services, you can add or improve. What are your low-hanging fruit? Go after those and get those initial wins. And then capturing faculty feedback. We're going to try. We haven't done anything official, but I think this next year we're going to do some surveys to get feedback. And again, as a leader, you can be moving in one direction and not realize that your faculty and everyone else is kind of going off in a different direction. You want to make sure you're really moving with everyone else. And then networking, make sure you're talking to colleagues across the region, your state, other HSIs, which clearly you are doing on this call. And I compliment you all for doing that. Because there's strength in numbers, and I also am a big believer in not recreating the wheel. I have no problem reaching out to a colleague and saying, do you mind if I mirror what you did here, or I model our program after what you did? Most people are going to be, feel very flattered that you thought to come to them and ask them to use something that they've developed. So with that, I will stop and take any questions from anyone that would like to ask anything. Guys are quiet. Did
A question?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, sorry. Definitely you have solutions and kind of your 8 steps. A lot of it was tied to, I think, resources or providing it, and I think that comes with a monetary, backing. So I'm just trying to think with some of the issues that was brought up of each university is lack of funds. So just trying to understand more, how do you combat that you definitely need reduced teaching load, you definitely need to have a stronger OSP staff. So assuming no funds are there for that effort, what are your other solutions? And maybe they're minor, but I'm just kind of curious your thoughts on that.
Sure. And I don't really have a lot of resources. I mean, I'll be honest with you. As I said, I haven't hired any more staff. I've reorganized them. I'm hoping to hire, with the exception of the compliance, which was a different thing. But pre and post award, I haven't hired any more staff. I have 2 people, I'm pre and 2 people in post. But I will say that part of it is I get so excited about things, and I am willing to jump in myself and help them with anything, that I think they have come to kind of, if you will, they've jumped on my train and they're very excited to help faculty in any way possible. I am able to, I built a small culture within my office immediately of a team, and it's a team where no one person is more important than another person. We do an activity every month for a half a day. We get out of the office and we do a volunteer activity every other month. And the odd months, I take them and we do, like we did glass blowing, we did the painting. So it's very important that they understand they are valued, and it makes them want to help the faculty all the more, and want them, want to work 10 hours a day. And while that's not sustainable, that's what I needed to do in the beginning to grow this culture where people really wanted to be here and they wanted to give their all to support the faculty, because they saw me jumping in and doing it with them. And it wasn't me VPR. I'll take a meeting with a faculty and I'll edit a proposal and I'll do a bio sketch. Like, there's, again, part of it is how that particular ORSP team is solidified and how they can work. The faculty release time, while I didn't get any more money this year, I did work with the CFO's office to change the way it was distributed. In other words, they used to give me a number of, like, you can have 80 faculty with release time. And I said, I don't want that. I want to know what my budget is. What money have you set aside for this particular program? And they're like, no, it's 80. And I said, no, I want to know what number you have budgeted, because it's my responsibility to allocate that money. That is not your business decision as a CFO. You tell me the amount of money I have, I determine how it's given out. So doing that allowed me to work with deans to really figure out, is it 10% of someone's salary that you need? Or is it the cost of an adjunct? Because there's a huge amount of difference in that money. Mm-hmm. Same thing with, why do we have to give them one every semester? Maybe there's some people who could get it in the fall and some in the spring, rather than being told you don't get anything. Let's divide it up differently. Same with graduate assistants. They came back and said, you have 100. I don't want to know the number. What's my budget? And then, it takes a couple iterations, and then, okay, your budget's this, great. Now I can allocate it based on helping the most faculty. So again, it's not always asking for more. It may just be rethinking how you're distributing that same pot of money to help more people.
That's really good points. Is it Appen or Sweden next? I don't know. They both have their hands raised.
Let's go with Appen.
All right, great. Thanks. Hi, I'm Apan Qasim from Texas State. Thanks, Dr. Porterfield. Thanks so much for your talk. This was really informative. I had a question about the 12-month faculty that you mentioned. So we have a similar situation at our institution, and we have these two kind of scenarios where one faculty who's really, very prolific in terms of bringing in funds, and they're covered for 12 months, and but they don't know how to pay themselves from these additional grants, right? And then we have some the second category where some of our senior faculty are involved in sort of associate dean and similar positions, and they're also under a 12-month cycle, and they have less of an incentive to apply for grants. But we think that they'll be really valuable for leading some of these larger grants, right? And so right now we don't have a way to provide funding for these faculty who are on a 12-month scale. So I was wondering if you could provide a little bit more details what it took to change that policy at your institution.
Sure. So if you can imagine where I came from at Hopkins, everyone had this problem. So when I got here, I was kind of like, well, what do you do with these people? And they were like, what do you mean? What do you do with them? I'm like, well, okay, let's give example A. He's an associate dean. He's 12 months, but he's on 2 different NSF grants for a month each. I said, you're not compliant because you're not charging NSF for this month in the payroll system. Okay, we'll do that. I said, well, no, you can't do that because who gets those 2 months of salary? Oh, it just goes back into the main salary account. I was like, no. He should be benefiting from that, not the central salary account. So what we're now doing, and I had to lay it all out on paper, and I was like, the CFO is not benefiting from us getting grants. It's not happening. So we now twice a year will take that 2 months and we transfer it into his discretionary account, and he's able to buy supplies, travel, whatever. So if you come up with this idea or this policy and you share it with your senior faculty who aren't on grants, and you say, hey, here's a way for you to get some extra money to have students, to travel, to do whatever, you can apply for these grants, and then this money, the equivalency, is going to go into this account for you to spend. It really, it wasn't that hard of a sell when I showed the deans that Central was making out, not their faculty. And then it was like, oh yeah, right. There's got to be some benefit to them, or why would they apply? So, and I'm happy to send you kind of my draft, or my policy, and you can, look at it and kind of take parts from it.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, that would be awesome. We would really appreciate that.
Sure.
Because the reason I was saying that is, I'm just like a lowly professor, and so in order to implement something like this, we need the help from the upper administration. So some kind of policy document, that would be terrific. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and Pat will tell you, because I work at her institution, that I am nothing if not tenacious, and I don't if things don't make sense to me, I'm not going to let them go. I'm going to keep pushing, and that's just the way it is. I'm just going to keep advocating and pushing. I do it in a very polite way, but I'm not going to give up.
Perfect.
Shweta.
Hi, this is Shweta from John Jay College. My question was about the RTR one. So basically, what is the RTR application process to get by release time for faculty who are research active? And the second, I'm echoing back on Apan's question of these policies for the research funds, because we have a 69% overhead on salary.
IDC, yeah.
Right, and then we get back some money as PIs, and we get back some money to the department, but then there's a huge pot of money that sits with the president and the provost, and we have no idea what happens to that money. It's possible that they're allocated to a different department and not our own. And how do I get insights on where that money goes and then negotiate?
Right. So let me start with that part, and then we'll go back to RTR. So there are central financial models and dispersed financial models at most universities. And what that means is the IDC could come in centrally to the president or provost, or it could come in directly to the colleges or the divisions. So Hopkins was a dispersed model where the IDC money always went to the divisions, and the divisions were taxed for all the central facility pieces and the libraries and all that kind of stuff. So the money sat out in the divisions, they were taxed, and that's how central was funded. We're the opposite, where money all comes in centrally, and then it's dispersed out to the colleges and the divisions through an annual budgeting process. So before I got here, all the IDC, which you have to realize that 3 years ago, we had about not even 3 million in sponsor projects. So, I mean, we're not talking very much money. And a lot of our state grants don't have IDC on them. But anyway, the IDC was all going into ORSP, and that's how they were paying the ORSP staff. So when I got here, I said, well, we got to give some back, so there's an incentive. So we came up with this 75, 15, 5, 5. And so the first time that was done was last October, where we dispersed this out to the divisions. But your VPR or whoever's in charge of your ORSP entity should be able to tell you what the IDC distribution model is for your institution. And it's going to be based on where the money goes initially.
Yeah, we know who has the money, but we don't know how they spend it.
But see, to me, that's a transparency issue. They should be willing to tell you that. You know, maybe they're funding internal programs. You know, if anybody asked me, what do you do with the 75% you get back? I could break down and go like, okay, here we do research days every year. It costs us $30,000. We do internal awards back to faculty for $200,000. Like I could break it all down, and that's what they should be able to do for you. I mean, that's a legitimate question in my mind. Or otherwise, you know, you could renegotiate the split.
Okay.
And then as far as RTR goes, again, I want to blow this up next year, but currently in the fall, faculty have to apply, and it's a super complicated application. It's way longer than it needs to be. And I mean, I'm looking for a one-pager that says what you do. That's it. I mean, you're either doing research or you're not. And then there's a union contract because our faculty are unionized. So then there's a review committee in each college that looks at all the applications from their college and they rank them. And then those come over to the provost's office and they're aggregated. And they're, again, in the past, you know, the business office would say, we're going to give you 80. They draw a line at 80. That's how it was decided. And I said, first of all, if you come from a college where not a lot of people apply, it's not very competitive. If you say the first whatever percent of your college are getting funded, everyone's getting funded. And if you come from a very competitive college where there's a lot of applications, you could be so much more deserving than somebody over here in a college that doesn't do research, and you're not going to get funded and they are. So that's all wrong too. We can't do it by college. And then again, we can't do it by numbers. So I got to see them this year, but I was very late in the process. No one was looking at, hey, this is a second year and you're not giving it to them. What do you think the chances are they're going to walk out the door at the end of the year? Pretty high. So I go to the CFO and I say, are you going to let this person who we've invested startup in, we've now had them for 2 years, walk out the door for $10,000 for the cost of an adjunct? And his answer to me, well, everyone wants more money. Like, oh my God, do you not see the cost benefit analysis here? That for $10,000, I could keep this faculty. So I ended up taking money from my budget. There were like 15 additional people that I thought were flight risks. And I said to the provost, I'm giving them, you know, I'm giving these 15 people RTR because in my mind, the cost of not giving it to them is so much higher than whatever I'm going to have to pay for my budget. But again, those conversations were never happening in the past where people connected consequence to decision, especially in the research world.
Excellent. I think the last one here, I think we have Jesus. Jesus, go ahead.
Hello, Jesus Jimenez from Texas State University Ingram School of Engineering. So congratulations, you're doing an impressive work. I enjoyed your presentation. I want to ask you a couple of questions from the leadership standpoint to see, understand more about what you're doing. People say culture, it's strategy for breakfast. And I think as you develop these strategies to become R2, I imagine this is one of the big aspects. So what kind of tools or activities you're doing to, change the culture, making sure that people don't fall behind or people they find their place in this new R2 reality for your institution. And secondly, you have mentioned about cost benefits. So I imagine you have to do a lot of metric and data collection to basically quantify what is the return of investment and communicate it to people like your CFO or your president. So what kind of things are you doing to prioritize your projects? But thank you.
Thank you. So yeah, sustainability is probably kind of the next phase, I guess you will, after the culture shift. Because our numbers were done as of June 30th of 2023, our R2 numbers. So we're just like in this holding pattern now. There's nothing we can do to change those numbers. So I'm trying to shift the messaging now away from we want to become R2 to how are we going to implement strategies to sustain R2? Because the people that are on that bubble very much flow back and forth. I mean, there's times when they might go back down and then there are times when they go back up. And while part of it is the academic piece, the research piece is the one I have to worry about. And so that ties back to these faculty who get one award and get frustrated and don't go after other awards, or we need to keep that pool of active faculty looking for external funding active. So I need to continue. I have lunches with my early career faculty every other month. So I bring them together and we just talk about, what are you going to apply for? What do you need help with? We're definitely should be doing these partnerships with more universities if they're not quite ready to do it on their own. I'm teaching them about NIH mechanisms right now because we don't have NIH funding. We have a lot of NSF funding, but there's the equivalent of an NSF career award in NIH, and we just need to educate and talk about what that would look for and will look like and do some workshops on that. As far as leadership goes, I feel like I am constantly educating them. I didn't realize when I got here how specific and how basic I was going to have to be to just even explain what indirect costs are, explain what a no-cost extension is, explain what, it's constant. And we're also in a weird situation. I find it weird that most of our senior leadership came from the K through 12 world. They did not come up through the higher ed world. And so that's another reason why I am constantly having to educate about this may work there. I mean, our CFO came from, like he was a CFO of a community or a municipality. So again, not from the higher ed world. And for the most part, they're open to my feedback. I think obviously coming from Hopkins, I have some legitimacy, so they're willing to listen to most things I have to say, but it's exhausting. I mean, I work 60, 70 hours a week at Hopkins and I wouldn't say I was exhausted. I work 30 hours here and I'm exhausted, but it's because it's a different kind of work where you're constantly having to explain what you do and justify what you do. And like I said, educate leadership as to what has to happen. As opposed to, like thinking of great strategic things to implement and, that kind of thing. So it's taken me back to the basics. And I spend a lot of time every week just, again, showing people why this is important, why we need to do it. And, data, we don't have good systems right now. That's something I would love to get better at. I'm hoping Cayuse will help us a little bit just on the number side. But yeah, it's super important. I want to show return on investment from, RTR. What happened with those faculty who got RTR last year? Did they publish? Did they get a grant? What did they do with that? So a lot more to come on that front.
Great. Well, thank you, Sue. That was fantastic. And thank you, Patricia, for bringing Sue. That was absolutely great. You guys are doing amazing work. And because you're really like building things from the foundation, you just brought so much insights. It's just amazing. So thank you. That was excellent.
Thank you. And I think you're going to share the slides. I had sent the slides, and I'll also share that the faculty kind of return on investment account. And you have my email. So seriously, if anybody wants to reach out one-on-one and has a question, feel free to do so. I love meeting you and seeing what your struggles are. So thank you for having
so
me.
much. And we'll invite you back if you want to go to the action plan with all the, when we invite all the administrators for the team. If you're, we'll invite you, and if you can come, that'll be great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Okay, everyone, we're now going to have a 10-minute break. And so please come back at, I have 2:30, so 2:40 my time. And then we're going to move into the guided inquiry and then into our team and mentor work. So have a good break. See you in 10 minutes. We're going to get started. Welcome back, everybody. We're going to get started. As you can tell, we at ASWE multitask. And so now let's get started into our guided inquiry. I think we're going to go to the next slide, which is we're going to start a 30-minute breakout session comprised of 2 to 3 institutions per breakout room. In this session, you will first debrief on the administrator interviews that you did, and then place yourself in the shoes of an administrator, respond to the 4 prompts provided, particularly how they compare and contrast with the responses that you received from your interviewees. So as you can see, here are the questions. What are the biggest enablers and barriers to success regarding IRR? What are your biggest goals or priorities for IRR? How would you leverage your influence to increase IRR? And how would you create cohesive vision for your faculty, VPR, provost, president? A link to the documents being provided in the chat. Select a recorder to fill out the shared document and a reporter to briefly share the highlights of your discussion after the session. So take a screenshot of that, although I believe it's also going to be in the links for you, but feel free to take a screenshot of this as we move you into your breakout rooms to do this breakout work. So I'll turn it over to Kathy.
All right, I am going to open all the rooms now.
Thank you. So welcome back, everyone. It's our hope that you had meaningful discussions in your breakout rooms, and we're now going to hear from the designated reporter from each of the breakout rooms. So let's move to the next slide. Alex? So let's start with group 1. What did you find? What were your insights on the your discussions? Group 1 should be Texas A&M and University of North Texas.
Group 1, we have, let's see, Bozan, David, Jouet.
I can talk about a little bit of this.
Okay.
And
Sure,
we didn't,
thanks.
yeah, we didn't write down any notes in the shared Google document because we don't have any access to do it. Yeah, sorry about that. And we talked about many of our barriers, and most of the time the barriers, because we would like to know the common parts of our institutions, right? And most of the barriers, no matter it's from dean, it's from senior faculty member, or it's from the interview answer from our provost, most of them are trying to address the research and innovation, and how can we put more resources to prioritize our research efforts and make our work stand out. And another thing that is also very important is about this funding and resources. And as minority serving institute, sometimes it's difficult to attract students, especially minority students. And our funding sometimes is highly related to the numbers of enrolled students, and that is one thing important. And another important funding resource is from the research faculties. They bring in the NSF fundings and all these staff fundings. This is somehow related to the first items we need to prioritize, which is how can we make our research more stronger and more let everybody knows our research work. Yeah, is that a good answer?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Okay, now let's move on to group 2.
Well, I represent Group 2. This is
Okay, go ahead,
students
Jesus.
at Texas State, and we had Priyan from UNT, and we had the discussions on these 5 questions, and so I related a lot with the speaker, Sue, as she was explaining her transition to R2. We had something similar when I joined Texas State back almost 20 years ago, but now we're going on another transition, which is to become R1 institution. So something that I have seen over these 2 transitions is that there's the president has communicated the same vision to move the university in the direction and align the resources. And in these cases, they identified clearly where we were having the gaps and supported resources to accomplish those metrics. So for instance, in this transition, the president, Danfis, put an initiative called Run to R1 and has been communicating this effectively to all the faculty and administrators and the staff members, and the resources have been allocated to see what are the points, like in this case, Texas State. One of the points that has to improve is a number of doctoral students to graduate, and therefore the university as a whole proposed PhD programs that basically increase these metrics. So the vision from upper administration and getting the faculty follow this vision is important, and the culture is sometimes something to address, making sure that people doesn't fall behind, and those that are feeling abandoned by these initiatives, we need to find strategies to bring them up to speed. So for instance, a group that falls behind is those faculty members who are in associate professor levels, where the research maybe requires some incentives. So finding funding for them, seed funding for them, so that they can apply to those grants, or give them training on how to coach PhD students. Those kinds of things are becoming essential. So I think that's pretty much a summary of these 5 questions, and at the pace we're living here in the institution.
Thank you. Perfect. Group 3.
Yeah, so I represent Group 3, and unfortunately, I was the only one in the group, and I couldn't talk to anyone.
There was only one person in the group. We checked.
Yeah, they said that they were engaged in other meetings. So
Oh, so they were logged in, but you didn't have. Okay, would you like to share anything, Steph?
I don't have anything right now.
Okay, sorry about that, because we made sure when we saw people enter the rooms that there were multiple people in each room. So
Yeah, we were multiple, but unfortunately they were engaged in other activities.
okay, these things happen. How
I
about we
also
go
got.
to
Sorry, this is Ayush Goyal from Texas A&M Kingsville. I
Yeah.
also got disconnected in the middle and was trying to rejoin. Sorry, I had a connectivity issue. which group was I in? Was I in team 3? I mean, group 3?
Yeah, Kingsville was in group 3, yep.
Okay, I can present some of the outcomes from my homework.
Oh, no, this is the, oh, well, this is the, from the discussion. Let me go to group 4 and come back.
Okay, sure.
All right,
Sure.
yeah, group 4, would you like to report out?
Yeah, this is Ahmad from North Carolina ENT, and I'm the representative of Group 4. So we had a conversation between our 3 institutions, and we found the barriers for our institutions to be travel funding. Travel funding is required for our junior faculties to participate in the workshops, especially grant writing and development workshops, and for our established faculties to go to conferences and make connection, think about and prepare other proposals. That's something that it can help, but we are lacking. We think that we are lacking. And teaching load, of course, it was discussed from many different institutions. It's a big thing for every faculty member. I personally would say that you can do research maximum if you have 2 or 2.5 courses. When it comes to 3 and more than that, it would be very difficult to keep up with the research. That's a big problem that mostly our institutions deal with that, and we as faculties, we are those who kind of deliver the courses. And of course, in many institutions, we see that the enrollment is going up, and that means that the classes are getting bigger, or the number of courses that faculties are supposed to teach may increase. Another barrier that was discussed was the post-award management and resources, which is again an area that needs attention. When the funding comes, it happens sometimes that we realize that we have hard time spending the money and in the way intended. For example, in my institutions, if you have funding and you want to hire a postdoc, that would be a big project. And sometimes I heard from my colleagues saying that, okay, don't think about postdoc, don't ask funding for postdoc, because hiring postdoc here would be a really big challenge. And one reason for that, specifically for my institution, is about shortage of staff. That was one of the barriers that I mentioned, and I shared with the group, that shortage of the staff in multiple of our offices, it shows itself and impacts the faculty research. That's another thing that mentioned by me in the group and was shared by the group. In terms of enablers, we discussed having or hiring new faculties. That's a great enabler, because everyone who comes, they bring new spirit of research. They come and they try to establish new connections and collaborations that would work like a new add synergy in the entire department. And if you hire at the same time 2 or 3, which may happen sometimes if the department has the funding, you really feel that the department is jumping in terms of research. Supportive administration, of course, administration and the university staff and administration, they like to see that the faculties are successful in their research. So in most of the cases, their support, and that's my feeling, and it was my colleagues' feeling, that their institutions are supportive. So that is something that we believe is a good enabler. And something that I added to group was having a well-defined and nicely put a strategic plan that it somehow works like a roadmap, and put together the entire staff and students and administrative people together, so that, okay, this is a big goal that the entire institution is willing to achieve over a couple of years. For example, in our case, I see that they have this defined and set the goal to go toward R1 status, and everyone in the university is talking about that. And everyone, when you talk about that goal, everyone has a feeling about it, and everyone is supportive toward that. So I would say having a well-defined and well-announced strategic plan is a good enabler. In terms of goals and priorities for IRR, we discussed having or expanding the collaborative spirit and culture of research. That is something that was discussed, and personally, I advocate for that. Collaboration is a big thing, and with collaboration, you can get way more than what people can do as a soul. That's a great thing, and we thought that should be a priority. Teaching load adjustment, again, mentioned by many of the members of the team, the teaching load as a barrier. It's a priority to find resources in order to adjust it. Of course, it depends on the availability of funding, but that should be really that should be seen really as a priority by administrating people, so that researchers, faculties can do a better research. I think that was the summary of our discussion.
Perfect, thank you. I'm going to move on to the questions because our group 3 were really individual. So I think the next part is just our individual. So go ahead, Alex, advance the slide. So in the chat, this is an individual exercise. So in the chat, please put one thing you would suggest your dean, VPR, provost start doing to enhance IRR. So please put that in the chat. Everybody individually. Just one thing. Doesn't have to be the perfect thing, but one thing that really kind of surfaced from this discussion that you're reflecting on.
Can you repeat the question again, please? Was that enable?
Yeah, it's on the slides there. On the slide, the one thing you would suggest your dean, VPR, provost start doing to enhance IRR. Just everybody individually put it in the chat. One thing that you would like to recommend. Perfect. Excellent. Excellent. Great job. Excellent. Great ideas. Really great ideas. Okay, Alex, let's go to the next slide. Okay, the next question. What would be one thing that you would suggest them stop doing to enhance IRR? So put that in the chat. Got it. That's good. Thank you. Great, great. Yeah, this is just logical. Excellent. Good job. Great. Okay, I'm seeing a little bit of a lull now. So continue putting in, answering this question. I can see people keep going. And I'm going to just start to transition you into our breakout room. So continue putting answers to these questions in the chat as I move forward into the next slide. Alex? Okay, so as you're continuing to put, if you haven't answered yet those 2 questions, please continue doing so in the chat and do that individually. And now I'm just going to lead into just to this reminder that you know, because it's something we do all the time. We're going to move now into our breakout sessions with our teams and then the teams and mentors. So just to make sure everybody realizes that you first go into a breakout room with your team alone. and then you discuss and start to construct the team knowledge about your insights from today's sessions and discussions, and how you will handle the next assignment, which is about starting to develop your action plan. And then who will work on each of the 4 sections of the SRR IRR gap analysis. And then from there, from your teams only meeting, you're going to move into the teams and mentors. And that's when you get to, you're already ready as a team to think about what are you going to discuss with your mentors. That's part of your part 1. What are you going to discuss with the mentors? And then have that discussion. And then remember to select a reporter who's going to describe your discussions during these 2 breakout rooms in your report out. Okay, and with that, Kathy, I think that there's a lull in answering the questions, so we're good on that. And you can move Kathy into putting them into their teams only, and then which leads into their teams and mentors breakout sessions. Well, welcome back, everyone. And now we are going to do our reports out. So everyone has a reporter from their team. I'm just going to go in numerical order. Please, group 1, please give us a short report. Just, you know, what's 1 or 2 things rises to your mind as the best thing that happened in your breakouts today.
So I'm the representative of the group 1.
Yep.
So we said actually our discussion is focusing on like what will we do if we are provost, you know, if you're in the provost position. I think every member gave a great insights and the major limitations from stopping faculty to do research, including resources and also the evaluation and also the incentives. They all pro to the teaching perspective that is actually stop the faculty to do good research. So that's one of the insights we have collected from discussion.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Group 2, how about you? We have group 2, Texas State University. Would you like to report out?
Group 2,
Sorry.
champion would be Philip.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead, Jesus.
No, we discussed, you know, particularly about the initiatives from the university, the different transitions in research, and there was another colleague from another institution who was asking about how do we convince non-STEM provosts and presidents to adopt research-intensive solutions. And I share some experiences, but I think he has very interesting feedback that he can report in his time. So that's all.
Great, thank you. How about group 3? What would you like to report? North Carolina A&T.
Yeah, I think it was a great breakout, and we discussed the challenges that provost might have. To my opinion, the biggest was securing financial resources, because those financial resources can be used toward many different needs. Yeah. And we discussed, for example, using that financial resources. I'm sorry, because of the background noise, this is my kid.
That's okay. We have children on today, so
Yeah.
ourselves.
Yeah, the financial resources might be used to incentivize those research active faculties, or to hire adjunct professors so that the teaching load can be adjusted. Yeah, that was the conversation I had.
Great. I'm glad you had a good
Thank you.
discussion. Next up is group 4, Texas A&M, Kingsville.
Okay, sure. Let me just open my notes. Just Yes, so we had one point was the infrastructure support. We looked at the fact that in our infrastructure support, we were lacking bonuses or some sort of extra pay for faculty or research active faculty. And we thought that this is one area that the university can improve. And second was the bureaucracy and paperwork for like getting equipment. So we had some trouble with a server purchase recently in one of the grants. So we thought this is another area that we discussed as a team that needs improvement in our university. It took like several months to just make a server purchase from the grant funding. And third was the third area of improvement was the teaching load. So faculty in our department who are research active, only the top 2 or top 3 faculty who are research active were getting a less teaching load, but the rest still had to do teaching load, regular teaching load, even if they were research active. So that's another area that could be improved by either paying those faculty extra or hiring some temporary adjunct faculty in place to reduce the teaching load for that research active faculty. Yeah, so that's what we discussed and noted.
Great, perfect. Thank you. Next up is group 7, University of California, Merced.
Yeah, so unfortunately I was the only one in my group today, so I did not have a conversation with myself, but it was nice to have a moment of silence.
Did you have your mentor? Didn't you join your mentor?
In the later
The second half. Yeah, go ahead. Did you
Yeah.
have any discussion about that with your mentors?
Yeah, I mean, we did talk about difficulties in accessing the mentors asked about getting in contact with the folks who are in leadership. There was a good conversation, although I don't feel like our institution has the same issue, but there was a good conversation in the group about if leadership comes from a different discipline, being able to convince them of the validity of the work that you're doing and how to enable those kinds of collaborations. But again, I don't feel like that is much of an issue at our institution.
Great. That's good. It's we're all broadening our horizons on our cohort as far as how different institutions work and how even the leadership might view things in a little bit different way. So thank you. Now we have group 8, San Francisco State University. What would you like to report?
I was a group with Sarah, so I don't have too much to add. There was discussion about going to the R1 effort for institution, and maybe one thing I had, but we had a discussion about the leaders, if they're not innate non-STEM and maybe not see the benefit of research activity for your institution. They had really great suggestions of almost like a Dale Carnegie how to win friends and influence people approach about we can all have an action plan, but at the end of the day, if they don't understand and don't have buy-in, then what's the point? Because they make decisions. So they had some really great suggestions about thinking in their perspective, and then somewhere come up with strategies where they be in the middle with STEM folks to build research infrastructure across the board on campus. So I thought that was great.
That's fantastic. I like it. Been there by myself in the opposite way, being a provost or engineering provost at a liberal arts college, right? Same kind of thing. You have to be able to understand both sides and be able to communicate to work together. That's fantastic. Thank you. So now we're on group 9, CUNY John Jay College of Criminal Justice.
Hi, so we from today we got the insights that a lot of us have similar issues like teaching load and lack of funds and all that. But we were discussing about the next assignment, and one of the things we wanted to do was look at the overhead money that an NSF grant brings in comparison with others, so that we can properly educate our leadership on the equity of distribution of the funds that they get from the overhead money. So there's a huge difference. We get 69% overhead from the NSF money, but some other agencies is only 15% or even less.
Yeah, it makes a difference.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I have next is group 10, University of North Texas.
Hello everyone. In our meeting, we had discussed about the research infrastructure. Dr. Enrico and Dr. Ganesh shared their great insights, and then we had a discussion about the research funding, as well as we had discussed about the resources. And if we are in the proposed position, so what are the challenges we are facing? So each and everyone has shared their perspective. So it was a great discussion.
I'm so glad. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Group 12, Jarvis Christian University.
Hi everyone. Actually, we have a discussion about we have a lack of resources and employees, but at the same time we have this biology group. They wrote a grant, and I think they get the grants, and we're learning from them how they did that. And we wrote some grants, but we never get the feedback. We are trying to learn from what's the reason we couldn't do it, and work in other grants. This is how our discussion is going on, and we try to learn more about how we can write the proper way to get grants and get feedback in the same time.
Great, that's important. NSW does have a proposal development workshop like this. This particular program we're working on right now, all of us are participating. This is on improving your sponsor research offices. But we also have an ongoing proposal development workshop that is focused on the CyBR-MSI solicitation, which will be starting in the fall. So contact Kathy if any of the teams want to put in an application for that. And that's specifically for the proposal. And then they absolutely, in the same format, you'll have a mentor, and that mentor will give you feedback on your proposal before you submit it.
Okay.
So contact
Okay,
Kathy Coco and make sure that you're in the loop to submit an application for the proposal development workshop. Right?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. So group 13, how about the University of North Carolina at Pembroke? What do you have to share?
Yeah, we had a great discussion today. I thought it was really fruitful, especially hearing from Sue. One major point that I thought was really great was the redistribution of indirect costs back to the faculty and their departments. I think that especially for a university like Pembroke, that would be a critical, real push for incentivization and just not worrying about, well, I didn't factor this in. I didn't know I was going to need this, and now there's no money, then I can't finish my project, or, all those issues that we unfortunately run into being a small, predominantly undergraduate institution. The teaching load is a very big hindrance to a lot of faculty. So trying to figure out how to effectively reallocate some of that effort. Our provost is really great. She's new. She's trying to, really target this issue. I think especially hearing about how Sue did it without having any extra money, I could really bring that back to her, and maybe we can kind of brainstorm how that would work with us. And also the summer issue of teaching versus doing research at universities like Pembroke's. Oftentimes we aren't able to pay our professors through the summer. So a lot of them will have to pick up teaching. And that really cuts into when their research time is. So maybe incentivizing, creating incentives or whatever for having them err towards doing research instead of picking up extra courses throughout the summer. And another interesting point that we talked about was allowing for the flexibility of remote work, both in our faculty so that we don't lose great talent. When things do come up, Pembroke's a very rural area. People do take jobs here. This is true across our staff as well and our administration. And they just, they don't want to live here after a few months, and we lose a lot of great people, and that's unfortunate for us. But especially in our research admin office, we don't have any flexibility for remote work. And I think that is a big hindrance as to why, our poster hoard position was empty for multiple years, and now we finally have someone in there, and it's an office of 3 of us. We don't have a specific grant accountant, all these things that other universities have and are still feeling the need for more. We don't have it at all. So I think that allowing for even just the flexibility of a hybrid position, or flexible work conditions would really attract people to not only come to Pembroke but stay here. I think that's one of our biggest issues as an institution.
That is a really good insight, because like a sponsored research office, for something like you're saying, the accountant, that would be, very easily could be a remote position where you could get great talent at a reasonable salary if it was remote. Yeah, so totally agree with you. I think that's a great insight to bring up to your administration. So with that, I think we'll go. Thank you all for your report outs. I'm glad the mentor said they were very fruitful discussions, and so did you. And I'm really glad that you're making the most of your time with your mentors and with your teams. And I'm also glad that the assignments really are broadening your understanding and of the lenses of your administrators. That really was my intention. So, and that will really help you to be able to have your, really focus your action plan going forward. So Alex, you want to put up the closing slide? I'm just going to thank everybody for joining us today, our April meeting of the CyBR-MSI Community Practice. And remember that the next meeting will be on Friday, May 17th from 1 to 5 p.m. Eastern Time, just like today. Now, remember that your next assignment is due on Monday, May 13th at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, and then the mentors will provide their feedback by Thursday, May 16th at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Please remember to post your assignments in your team's Google Drive folder to enable your mentors to review and provide feedback. Now, I want to stress this because this is we're getting closer to your action plans, right? You can see that's what we're doing. You're doing this gap, you had the discussions, you're gonna have the gap analysis, then you're gonna develop your action plan, which is very data driven. And you're learning about, I love the idea that you're thinking through the lens, all the different lenses of how you're going to communicate your action plan. Remember also now, please get the June Culinary Action Plan meeting, which will be held on Friday, June 21st, on your administrators' calendars. Let them know that they should plan to attend the lightning talks from 1:20 to 3:05 Eastern Time, where you'll be presenting your IRR action plan. Each team will have about 5 minutes for this presentation, but we also want them to hear the other action plans too, because that will give them a context of what different institutions are focused on in highlighting what you're focused on. Now, also encourage them to participate in the breakout session for the teams that will be held from 3:15 to 3:45. And let us know who accepts your invitations with their email, and then send them the calendar. We will send them the calendar invite. So I would say that we will send the calendar invite to whoever you give us the emails to. So we're saying, ask them and invite them. If you still, whoever you want us to send that invitation to, I think that even if they don't give you a clear yes, but they're a maybe, or they think that's promising, I think we still should get the calendar invite on their calendar so they know that it's happening. Because I think it's really important for them to be here and hear your hard work and hear how it's in the context of this cohort. So please remember to email Kathy with the administrators that you want us to send them the calendar invite to get it on their calendars for that June 21st meeting for where we're going to be doing the lightning talks for the action plans. So with that, I'm going to let you out and give you about 10 minutes back early to your weekend. And thanks, everybody. And we will see you next month. I think we can turn off the recording now. Says you can't hear.